I'm Anthony Lacavera. Over the last 20 years as a founder, CEO, tech investor, and TV host, I've had the privilege of building relationships with incredible individuals that are driving positive impact globally. Trailblaze brings you these conversations with innovators across all walks of life who are carving through uncharted territory with new and unique approaches to design and build a better future for our world. Trailblaze highlights their personal journeys with stories of resilience, business and personal challenges, and the wisdom gained through the eyes of these leaders who are striving to challenge the status quo. Let's get into today's episode. Congratulations on getting Willful off the ground.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Congrats on getting a podcast off the ground.
Yeah. I felt like it was finally time to step back into the social media arena. I appreciate you making time to have a conversation.
Yeah,
You're the first of hopefully many conversations. And
a lot of pressure.
Yeah. So I'm hoping you can save me from myself and make this great.
No, it'll be great. And we have Daniel and the team who are awesome. Yeah. So I'm sure they'll be able to, even if we sound like shit, they'll be able to edit it into something usable.
Erin, tell me, are you based in Toronto still?
So we are actually out in Prince Edward County now.
Oh, cool. Okay, cool. You've completely relocated, or?
We had a vacation home here since 2017. And when COVID hit, we went remote at Willful. And so we decided to move out here full time. And we had our first child 3 months ago. So we were like, it's nicer to raise a kid out here. Thanks. So we're now permanent non-city residents.
Wow. And let me ask you, how has the corporate culture been affected positively or negatively by the whole remote work construct?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we got our first dedicated Willful office February 1st of 2020. So we really only had 6 weeks to actually enjoy it.
2 weeks of non-COVID.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's tough to say. I actually love remote, especially now as a new parent. Not having to commute, being able to be close to the house is so much nicer. But you miss the Friday drinks, you miss the impromptu conversations. And it's hard to keep that kind of ephemeral get to know you vibe when people don't work together directly on a team. So I'd say in general, I love remote work. And I feel like for my life, it works really well. For team cultures, do you get as deep bonds as you would in person? Probably not, but I think people are willing to sacrifice that for the other benefits. I don't know if you found the same.
Yeah, it's very interesting because people are trading that increase in quality in your personal life that comes from more time with family, more time with kids and friends. And the question becomes how much is it hurting productivity from not having the same kind of bonds and interaction in person with your coworkers? I feel like, I don't know what you think. I feel like it's sort of a very much an individualistic, personal thing. Some people absolutely thrive in it and are excelling in it, and productivity goes up and their personal life is better. And other people, unfortunately, are having kind of the opposite experience. So I feel like it sort of comes down to the individual, which was true in the old work environment too. Some people were terrible at commuting an hour every day on the highway, and some people were fine with it, right? So
yeah, we haven't found productivity has gone down. If anything, at least for myself, it's gone way up, right? I mean, if I think about I'm an extremely extroverted, chatty person. So I would often be the distraction in the office who was asking people about their night and, chit-chatting and pulling people aside. And so I find I'm way more productive. And also because if you think about, even just getting to and from meetings, right? The amount of time I would spend in the back of an Uber or on a streetcar getting to and from a meeting, which really conceivably could have been a conference call. Some days I'd be traveling to and from meetings for 50% of the day. So I kind of think that the benefits of the productivity that you gain from not commuting, not having those distractions, and not having to travel to meetings is worth a little bit of a hit on the impromptu side of the personal relationships. And we've implemented things like, the donut plugin for Slack, where you get randomly paired with team members for coffees. And we do, we did an in-person Christmas party right before Omicron broke out. And so we're still going to do in-person stuff, but just not, obviously, it's not the same, but I think it's better, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. Right. For sure. So I think I'm with you on the net. This has been a great positive. And I think it worked so well because people did it all en masse. Can you imagine if it had sort of gone the telecommuting, remote work, hybrid, sort of slow roll that we were in pre-COVID, right? It was just these incremental steps with technology, like incrementally becoming part of the equation. I think that would have been a lot more painful than just suddenly a switch where just everybody was suddenly in that environment. And now no one was expecting you to spend that 50% of your time traveling between meetings because everyone expected it to be remote, right?
100%. Well, and 90% of companies would never have gone fully remote because they would have been dragged into it kicking and screaming. I mean, the number of people I know who worked for companies who said they would never allow work from home, they would never be remote. Well, nobody had a choice. And as soon as people saw how efficient people could be from home and how much overhead they save not having an office, it kind of became the de facto no-brainer, right? So, but you're right, even hybrid, right? So we still have our office. We pay a pretty penny for it that we're not getting use of, at least until our lease is up next year. But we were considering doing hybrid. But then it's this awkward, like, okay, 2 of you are in the room at the office and 2 of you aren't. And so, it's just weird. Like, to be honest, it's better to be all in person or all remote. Otherwise, hybrid is, I think people are going to have a bit of a challenge with it.
I agree. It creates a very awkward dynamic, and the conversational flow is very difficult to get a nice cadence when you have that. You have that partial remote, partial in person, for sure. Can we take it back to the top? Like, how did you come around to the opportunity to create Willful? How did that journey become part of your life? I know you had a very successful career before Willful, doing a variety of things. What caused you to make the entrepreneurial leap?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely not I'm assuming you were one of those born entrepreneurs who had, lemonade stands and businesses from the age of 10. I was definitely not. My parents both worked at Nortel. And so I had the example of, corner offices and big corporate expense accounts and things like that. So I aspired to the same thing. My pinnacle of success was, can I make a 6-figure salary working for a big Fortune 100 company, right? And it was only after graduating from journalism school that I went to work for a startup and really got introduced to the startup scene. So that kind of made me want to become an entrepreneur, but I've never really been an ideas person. I've always been great at someone else having an idea and me executing it. So it was actually my husband, Kevin, who had the idea for Willful after a family member passed away. And he saw how inefficient it is if you don't have proper plans in place. And when we looked into it for our own estate planning, we found, we had to go to a lawyer's office and book an appointment in the middle of the workday. And it was going to cost us thousands of dollars. And it was one of those like, hey, we're using Wealthsimple, Uber, Airbnb, all of these apps for every single.
We're back to this like archaic experience.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that really hadn't been changed or touched in a long time. And to be fair, we didn't reinvent the wheel. We saw companies like Trust and Will and Fairwill doing this in markets like the US and the UK and thought, we can do this in Canada and there's a really big need for it. So originally, I was just an investor and supporter advisor of Willful, and Kev really spent the first 12 months just getting lawyers on board and trying to get it off the ground. And then after a lot of, hey, why don't you join the company? I finally, about 18 months in, I was like, yeah, this could be a really exciting adventure, even though I'm going to have to talk about estate planning all day, which at first didn't seem very sexy, but now I'm very passionate about.
Well, there's that element too of sort of like the morbid sort of like end of life element to it, which I can imagine you've had to like bifurcate from your day-to-day existence to make sure you don't get emotionally entangled with, I'm sure, some of the experiences.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we always joke about how now we're the death people. Like anytime someone reads in the news about a will or an estate dispute or, a celebrity passing away without a will, everyone is in my family and friend group is always texting links to me. Like we've become those people. But Kevin and I always talk about how, one of the reasons he started the business is because we are so reticent to think about or talk about our own mortality, even though it's this certainty in life. And actually one of the things I'm grateful for is that Kevin and I have had so many conversations conversations about that. What kind of services would we like and what kind of legacy we want to have. And obviously we have wills that are up to date and all of these plans. And we talk about that with our parents and our extended family and our siblings. And I don't know that a lot of families really prioritize talking about that because it is uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
it kind of becomes less scary the more that you actually just chat about it.
Well, it's kind of interesting, right, that you've brought that element to it where it can become a dinner table conversation and you're sort of giving people the software and the framework and the solution to make it an easier part of their life and make it part of the conversation before it happens normally, the way it happened to your husband, right? As somebody passes away unexpectedly and then you're dealing with all these issues in the middle of grief as well. It's sort of like a very hard situation 99.9% of the time. And so I feel like it's a market that was ripe for disruption, and I'm excited that you brought a solution to it.
Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely something that is our biggest challenge is really the law, right? So you still, in every province except British Columbia, you still have to sign a will on a physical piece of paper with a physical pen. And so
Okay.
there's a lot of room to grow in terms of bringing that process fully online because you can you can buy a $10 million house online. You can do pretty much anything online, but you still have to have that physical will printed out. So I think there's a ways to go and there's some of that we can't affect or we can't really control. But I'm confident that COVID has definitely moved things in the right direction because who the heck has a printer at home these days?
I'm sure one of the things people will be interested to hear about is the experience of your husband being a co-founder and you building that business together. What has been your experience so far? What's been the great things about having your spouse and life partner be your business partner, and where have the challenges been?
Yeah, so Kevin and I always say that we work well together because we don't really work together. We have our very different swim lanes at the business. And I think from the beginning, we recognize that we are not personalities that mesh well together in the workplace. I am a very organized type A, hyper productive. And Kev is totally the creative entrepreneur. He's the one that's constantly head in the clouds, dreaming about what could be and what's coming down the pipeline. And we're just, we don't mesh well in terms of the day-to-day work, but we have really complementary skill sets that should exist in an entrepreneurial business. So, he reports to our COO on the team and really handles things like, customer research, market research, product innovation. Whereas I kind of stay over here in the CEO lane and focus on things like fundraising and strategic planning and things like that. So I would say that's how we make it work is we have complementary skill sets, but we also are smart enough to recognize that we don't work well together. But in terms of the family life, it's interesting. So we just had our first kid 3 months ago. And I'm taking 4 months. I'm going back in just under a month. And part of me was like, I wish I had a government job where I could just take 12 months and not even
Right.
think about work while I'm away.
Right.
But then I'm like, I'm not that kind of person. And actually, entrepreneurship has afforded us so much flexibility, both because as an entrepreneur, you can define your own schedule. You can, really
Totally.
plan your days however you want. But also working with my partner means that we've been able to kind of build a schedule that works. Whereas a lot of my friends who are in the same new mom boat as me, their partner went back after 2 weeks. And so we've been grateful to have a
Much
lot of
harder, right?
flexibility that comes along with entrepreneurship.
Yeah, no question about it. And on that topic of staying in your lane, what I've seen happen in a number of different entrepreneurial settings where there's a co-founders that are either in a relationship or spouses is people don't stay in their lane. And that is sort of consistently I've seen a recipe for difficulties. What I would say it comes back to, and I think it's a very positive reflection on you and Kevin, that you both have the self-confidence in your own capabilities to be very comfortable staying in your lane and letting and handing other responsibilities to someone where you don't necessarily have as good as a strong a skill set, right? People often for their own insecurity reasons I've found in the past just can't keep themselves really in that place, right? So good for
Yeah.
you for making that work. I actually think that there's a really great opportunity to have more companies built by spouses because in the new remote work environment, there's going to be so many more settings like the one you're in with a newborn and having the opportunity to spend so much more time with the newborn, having both parents have the opportunity to spend more time. and being able to do work with a schedule that you control, I feel like you have your life very well optimized for a successful parenting run.
Hopefully. I mean, some unpredictable diaper changes always pop up that make my perfectly hatched plans go awry. But yeah, I mean, I
Sort of
think
mid client meeting. Wait a minute, I've got to go change that. Yeah, right.
yeah, exactly. But I feel like as well, when we were raising our seed round back in the spring of 2020, there were some investors who said, oh, you're a husband and wife team. I actually like that because, no one's ever saying, why are you working till midnight? Or, hey, can you
Right.
stop thinking about the business? You're always inherently thinking about the business and you're both so committed. Other folks said, we've had experiences where the spouses have split up or things haven't gone well. So I think one of the things Kevin and I did very early on was we had those honest conversations. If
Yeah.
our relationship, I mean, we've been together for a long time, so we weren't super concerned about that, but things happen. And if we were to separate, we made a decision on who would stay in the business, who would exit the business, what that would look like. And I think a lot of folks, and this is any co-founders, not just husbands and wives, they go into a business assuming that the relationship will go well. And it's kind of like
Right.
a prenup when you're getting married. Like you're planning for what happens in worst case scenario. And a lot of co-founders actually don't do that. And so we did. And thankfully it hasn't had to come to that worst case scenario, but having that plan of, okay, what would that look like if this relationship were to break down, gives the investors confidence that, okay, my investment is not going to, go to crap
The
because
business
you guys.
doesn't implode because one person. Yeah.
Exactly.
I wonder if that's a product extension opportunity for Willful to sort of help people plan the end of a business relationship and how that can unwind as painlessly as possible and as profitably as possible. I mean, you're right. People don't plan for those things to end, and marriages end and business partnerships end all the time. And they are
Yeah.
never easy in my experience. I've just seen so many protracted litigations and protracted erosion of value because people just can't align on how to unwind something.
Absolutely. And a lot of times when I see co-founder relationships break down, I think it's because they went in on the same page, but then one of the co-founders' life changed, right? So they went in as a single person in their 20s who could work 24/7, and then all of a sudden they have a family or they have priorities outside of work, but the other person is still working 24/7. So I think a lot of successful marriage or a successful co-founder partnership is just being honest along the way around priorities and what's changed. And for us, we're pretty aligned on that. But at the same time, we constantly check in. And actually, Kevin's taking some parental leave when I go back full time because I'm the
Oh,
CEO,
cool.
and I'm more integral to the day to day than he is. Although he's obviously important to the business. So that's what works for us, and it might not be the most common, but I think it's also a good example to set that the co-founders are both taking parental leave, because a
No
lot of times
question.
in tech, I think it's really frowned upon to take parental leave or to put your family before your job.
Unfortunately, that's kind of the reality still today, right? As much as we've tried to talk about mental health and family health and personal well-being, we still have this like crazy pressure in the tech industry that is really not healthy in many ways. But I think it's going in the right direction. Personally, I
Yes.
hope it's going in the right direction. So I wanted to ask you, so far along the way, okay, so you're, I guess, however, a couple of years into your entrepreneurial journey, what's been the most difficult moment so far? And can you explain that? And then I'd like to talk about how you overcame it.
Oh, great question. I mean, I think the most difficult moments have all been related to funding our journey as a company. And I think that's so common for companies in Canada. In the early stages of the business, it was really difficult to find money anywhere, right? You go to the
Right.
bank and it's very difficult, especially with a software business, to get any sort of credit facility that isn't tied to your personal credit, right? Where if the
No
business
question.
doesn't do well, then I also lose my house. Like, I don't know if that's a bet
Right.
I'm willing to make.
Yeah. It
So
doesn't
you're
seem like a rational bet, right?
no. So you're running the business off your personal credit cards, and that's also awkward. In the early days, it was really tough. Luckily, we had a group of investors and advisors who were each willing to kind of write a very small check. And so we had a bit of a friends and family around to get us off the ground. But I always think about people who are in rural environments or who don't have family and friends that are able to do that, and really the options they have to get themselves off the ground. For us, probably the most difficult and pivotal moment was the seed round that we raised in the spring of 2020. Not just because it was the first time that we were going to formal venture capitalists, but also because the round was happening right in the middle of COVID. So we actually got
Yeah.
a term sheet on February 27th of 2020. And then, of course, about,
Oh no. Oh
14
my
days
gosh.
later, as we're going through all of the paperwork, the world explodes. And
Oh my gosh.
we raised from an amazing investor called Tactico out of Montreal, but they're a bit of a non-traditional investor in that they have special purpose vehicles where they have a group of investors versus having a traditional fund model. So it was really dicey there for about a month where we had a term sheet. We were really excited. We were working through the paperwork, and then we thought the bottom had fallen out. And of
Right.
course, we had already started some hiring decisions and progressing the business forward. And so it was that moment of, are we actually going to get this money? If we don't, what's our backup plan? And, is anybody going to be investing in companies right now during COVID? Because you remember, nobody knew what was happening or how things would go. So, and how we overcame it, I think we just communicated regularly with our investor, and luckily they were super honest and upfront throughout the whole process. And the round did end up closing in May, and after things kind of settled down a bit and everyone stopped freaking out.
Right.
But it was definitely a challenge in that it's hard enough to get one yes from a venture capital investor. We got, infinite no's and still do to this point, that when you get that one yes, you forget that the term sheet is just the first step in the
Right.
process to getting a check in the bank. There's about 100 pages of legal documents and due diligence and weeks, if not months, of work that happen after that term sheet before you actually get to go spend the money. So it was also a good reminder to be cautious but optimistic when you do get something like a term sheet, to make sure you're not spending everything before the money's in the bank.
Well, that's totally the right way to think about it, in my opinion. I think a term sheet, personally, I always say to founders, a term sheet is 1% of the way there. All of the real work starts after you get that term sheet. So it's great to hear you say that and had that experience. But it's great that you got to the right conclusion, the positive conclusion at the end.
Yes.
What were the nature of the conversations you were having with Kevin and your other team members at the time? Though this take you to like the April 2020, May 2020, that time frame when there's so much uncertainty in the world, in the macroeconomic picture, in addition to you being a startup and all the risks associated with that. So it's like, as you already said, a double whammy there, right? What were the nature of the conversations, and how did you think about contingency plans, or like, is the sky really falling and what do we do if it does?
Yeah, so we're probably unique in that for us, the 6 weeks after COVID hit in March were the 6 busiest weeks in our company's history, because everybody all of a sudden was terrified that they were going to die. And so, what do you do when you're terrified you're going to die? You go make a will, right?
Interesting.
Uh,
Interesting.
so the conversations we were having weren't, what if we have to lay people off? What if the business isn't doing well? The conversations about the investment actually were more so behind the scenes and not really shared with the full team. The conversations we were having was, holy hell, how are we going to staff all of the people that are coming to our website? How are we going to,
Wow.
handle all of the customer service inquiries? And how are we also going to make sure that people aren't totally burnt out personally because we're going through this massively busy period in our company's life cycle at the same time that everyone is pretty much freaking out, myself included, behind the scenes about
Right.
what this
Right.
means and how it changed our lives. So
Yeah.
it was a pretty wild 6 to 8 weeks. It kind of
Sure.
abated after that, just because that initial panic kind of wore off. Although we still see heightened interest in estate planning today because of COVID, and that reminder that the unexpected can happen, and it's good to be prepared. But yeah, a lot of the conversations were just, wow, we feel so fortunate, yet also guilty that we are a business that is really thriving during the pandemic,
Crushing it.
when all
Right.
the peers we see who own gyms and restaurants and all of these
Yeah.
businesses that were negatively
Crushed.
affected, like I found personally as a founder, I really struggled with it because I was like, how could I be going through this really successful boom period when all of these other people are struggling? But I think we just kind of reconciled it as, there's a lot of businesses that did benefit from COVID. And we tried to channel that into doing good things. Like we gave, hundreds of thousands of dollars in wills for free to frontline healthcare workers and things like
Oh,
that. But
wow. That's fabulous. Tell me more about that. Wow.
yeah, well, it was one of those things where my background is marketing. So we met when I was, running a marketing firm that worked with startups. And so when COVID hit, we had this massive influx of people to our website who wanted wills, but it felt really weird and awkward and tone deaf to be marketing wills. Like, hey, Anthony, did you know there's a global pandemic? You might die tomorrow. Better.
COVID's about to kill you. So it's probably a good time to buy our products.
Exactly. Like it just felt so weird to be actually marketing. So we basically put all of our marketing on pause for that reason. And we said to ourselves, okay, what can we actually do to talk about estate planning at a time where it feels kind of opportunistic to be talking about it?
Right,
and then we actually
position that, right? The
exactly
positioning was so key, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So we actually read a couple op-eds in papers like the Globe and Mail from physicians at hospitals who were saying, hey, everyone should be getting their estate plans in order, and talking about how they were encouraging hospital staff to get their estate plans in order because obviously they were being exposed to COVID. So not a great reason that a lot of healthcare workers were, looking to get wills in order. But we thought, okay, here's something we can do that adds value, that gives us something to talk about without it being a marketing effort, and that actually can give back because we don't have manufacturing facilities. We can't produce hand sanitizer or masks or any PPE. So this is the one thing that we can do to give back that seems to be needed. And there was an amazing reception to it. I mean, we got the word out through kind of press and media coverage and social media, and just had like a massive positive response. And we ended up giving them away for over a year because really COVID still isn't over. So yeah, it was kind of a way to give back in our own way, and a way that we could actually talk about estate planning during a time that was pretty sensitive.
Did you go into Willful thinking about ways that the business could have the kind of positive society impact, like independent of COVID? Or did this opportunity come up and you were like, wow, eye opener, I'm going after it?
For sure. I mean, from the beginning, listen, when I ran a marketing agency for 6 years, I loved working with clients that did any number of things, from Inkbox temporary tattoos to companies like PayPal to, tons of really, really small startups. But, sometimes I would go to bed at night and be like, am I really making a difference in selling more widgets to so-and-so? So one of the things that I needed to exist in whatever role I did take next was some sense of purpose. And I really felt the purpose was there inherently in the product because we had seen firsthand that if you don't have a plan, the hardship and the arguments and the grief that it can cause a family. So I think the nature of our product has a positive impact in that if somebody does have an estate plan, their family is much better off when something happens. But we also baked in purpose through charitable donations and wills. So I actually didn't know that you can leave, a dollar amount, a percentage of your estate to charity. It reduces the tax bill on your estate. So from the beginning, we built that in, and we've partnered with charities like Jay's Care Foundation and the Parkinson Society of Canada and Osteoporosis Canada. And so we spotlight charities. We work with them to help their donors learn more about legacy giving and to enable that on our platform. So that's
how do you screen, sorry to interrupt you on that. How do you
Yeah.
screen for the right charities that fit with the Willful mantra?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, Kev and I are personally involved with a few charities, so we started with that. I'm on the board at Save the Children Canada. I'm on the co-chair of the Tech for Sick Kids campaign, and Kev's on the young kind of patrons board at UHN Health Network. So we just started working with them, and obviously they're big kind of reputable organizations. And we wanted to learn, how do you currently educate people about this? Do donors know that they don't have to give $20 a month? That's not the only impact they can have. They can also kind of leave a percentage of their estate. And then really there's no restriction on it. So we partner with some of these higher profile established organizations, but if you went on Willful tomorrow, you could choose any charity from,
I
you know,
see. Okay.
small to large, and leave whatever you wanted to them. So we don't control that. It's really up to the person who's creating their will to say, hey, this tiny charity in my hometown is what I want to donate to, and more power to them.
It's interesting to think about how you could get to know someone as part of that will planning process and figure out like what is that person passionate about and where does it make sense for them to leave some of their estate. And as you said, then you can spotlight charities to
Yeah.
figure out for helping someone figure out the right place. So that part of the process is actually, to your earlier point, as like it's quite positive actually, that thinking about the end of your life in that way and what positive impact you're going to continue to have after you die.
Yeah, I mean, I always talk to people who say, wow, it must be really depressing to think about death all the time. And I'm like, I always reframe it to legacy, because if you actually think about, Bob Saget just passed away really unexpectedly. And what struck me was the outpouring of love for this person and the
Yes.
almost universally incredibly positive things that people had to say about him and the impact that he had. And that's what I always think about is, we're all going to pass away. I hope that we're 110. We may not be, but,
Yeah.
we can have a positive impact while we're here, but we can also leave a positive legacy. And so we just try to educate people through that process, because most people, I mean, I don't know about you, but I didn't grow up talking about estate planning or wills or
Zero.
learning
Not at
about
all.
it in school.
No.
Really your first introduction to it is often when a family member passes away,
Correct.
or
Exactly.
if
Yeah.
your family, a lot of families have had massive infighting or lawsuits or, things
Yeah.
around,
Sadly. Yeah.
sadly, yeah, because
Yeah.
people don't talk about it. So I really see our job at Willful as educating the average Canadian about the basics of wills and estate planning and about how they can have positive legacies through things like leaving gifts to charities. And then if they choose to make their will with Willful, great. We become the natural solution because we have a great product. But I don't really care. If you go to a lawyer and get a will, our mission is that more Canadians have wills. Do it however
Yeah.
you want. I think we have the most elegant solution, but we're also not a fit for everyone. Like, we're probably not a fit for you, Anthony. If you have multiple businesses and lots of different types of assets, you're probably going to go to an estate lawyer, and you probably should, right?
Yeah.
We're like the TurboTax. We're not going to be a fit for folks who have complex situations.
On that example of TurboTax, that's really interesting. So is there that live consultation element like Intuit is doing? Is that in your roadmap? Because I feel like that just added so much value to into its value proposition. Now having that live interaction with people.
Yeah, it's such a good question. So right now it really is kind of the basic TurboTax style experience where there isn't a human element other than reaching out to our support team if you have questions or need to consult on, what is a beneficiary and what is an executor, et cetera. But we've absolutely thought about that kind of live aspect. The nuance is that you're really entering a lawyer-client relationship as soon as someone's giving you legal advice. And so then you just become a law firm. And I think Kev and I are very passionate about helping people get wills. I'm not necessarily passionate about becoming Canada's largest cool law firm, right? So
Correct. Right.
it's definitely something we've thought about, but I'm not sure if we'll ever enter that kind of live expert lawyer client advice realm, or if we'll just partner with great firms that can offer that when we can.
Yeah, because it crosses that line into becoming a lot more complicated a business, it sounds like, if you're getting into owning and operating a law firm in addition to a software business.
Exactly. And when we think about the evolution of Willful, I actually think the future of the product is really helping you to compile, store, and share all of your end of life plans, not just the
Yeah.
legal document like the will. So compiling things like your asset lists, compiling, wishes for your funeral ceremony or your burial wishes, putting together a list of key contacts like your beneficiaries or your accountant or financial advisor. And then more importantly, creating that link, because I have a Google Drive folder full of all of that information for my executors, but would they know where to find it? Would they know how to access my email? Would they know what to do with my Facebook account? And most people, again, are not thinking about this stuff, right? No one's going on Facebook every day thinking, would Joe know
It's
how
like,
to access
yeah,
this if I were hit by
yeah,
a truck tomorrow?
right.
So that's what I think the product will evolve to, is something that helps you as the person who's going to pass away, compile all of that, but then share it with key family members, executors. So if something were to happen, they're not scrambling. They actually have the keys to this really well-formed plan that doesn't take a lot of time and effort to put together.
That brings me to like a question on like the business roadmap. There's an opportunity clearly to partner with investment advisors, where people are housing their assets, those types of firms, banks. Have you thought about kind of a B2B relationship construct for the business, or is this something that there's enough consumer pull and you long term is just going to be direct to consumer?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, right after we launched, we heard from big banks and life insurance companies about, the opportunity for partnerships. So we've been fortunate to partner with brands like Allstate Canada. We're currently working on a partnership with one of the big five banks. So there's definitely a B2B aspect to the business. I think for Kev and I mean, my background and expertise is in building B2C
Consumer
businesses. So
brands.
I don't think we'd ever want to be solely B2B, but to me, the B2B to C model, reaching
Yeah.
consumers through folks like Allstate or your financial advisor or your bank, whom you already have a relationship with and are already talking to about financial responsibility, it makes a ton of sense. So, yeah, we'll probably partner a lot more with businesses like that as we grow. And for us, the biggest challenge, you asked about the biggest challenge earlier. Funding was a big challenge in the operational side. The biggest challenge in our marketing is distribution, just like any startup. If you're a small company, acquiring customers one by one is expensive. If you can
Yeah.
get the audience of a company like Allstate that already has
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands, if not millions of customers, that's huge and can really kind of help you leapfrog to that next level.
Oh, there's no question about it finding those partners, but it's also a situation where it's like you say, expensive to acquire consumers one at a time. It's painful and expensive, but it's also there's an educational challenge, right, with what you're building because many people. So first of all, most people don't even think about it, as we talked about earlier. Like, there's no, why would I think about dying today,
Yeah.
right? I'll put that down like way at the bottom of my list of things to think about today, probably at the bottom. and so you have that challenge, but then you have the challenge also was once someone actually makes a will, people think of it as like today. I think people think of it as like a one and done. Okay, I got that
Absolutely.
out of the way. But your life changes, and if you do a will in your 30s, it's your life's going to look nothing. Hopefully, you do live to 110. Your life's going to look a lot different at 110 than when you wrote your will in your 30s. So, one of the things I love about your model too is that it's sort of you could characterize it as a transactional thing up front. We did a will for somebody, it's over, but it's not over. This is hopefully for you a lifelong relationship where you help someone evolve that will, right, and end up in a place where they feel great about the end of life situation for themselves.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you think about, I talked a bit about where I see our product evolving with these complementary tools that help you compile other end of life wishes. But when I think about the eventual future of the company, I mean, we're very happy as an independent company, but we've also had a lot of interest from folks on the acquisition side because we also know when someone's going through a life change, and we can really help empower them with the products, the financial products that they might need, or the insurance products that they might need as they go through those life changes. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for partnerships, but also for larger kind of corporate development conversations with folks who have great audiences and great products that are really complementary to what we're doing.
That's super cool. Erin, I really appreciate you chatting with me today. What I'd love to do is keep following up with you over time. I'm trying to build this compilation of founder journeys and founder experiences, and there always is a very difficult, challenging part of the story. And so I know you've shared one already, but I'm sure along the way you probably will have more. And so I would appreciate the opportunity to share a conversation with you again about it. I'm trying to compile these types of stories really for the benefit of first time founders that are hopefully going to be watching this.
Well, you have a wealth of experience yourself. So, as long as you commit to sharing your own stories, I think that would be wonderful. And yeah, really just appreciate you thinking of me for the first season, and great to catch up.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, you know what? You actually could interview me really well. So I'm very transparent with all of your experience. I'd love a conversation. I'm happy to share my most painful moments as well. So that would be fun. We'll do that next time.
Love it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Trailblaze. Would love to hear from you. Tweet me or comment on LinkedIn or Instagram and share what you took away from this episode. This show was produced by Creator Club Studios. You can start creating today at creatorclubstudios.com.